Greetings, pilgrims, and welcome to another episode of the Polygon Pilgrimage, and today I have something really cool to show you. This is our Gothic architecture set. So recently a buddy of mine has been doing a personal project, and he wants to do this kind of really cool Gothic cathedral that's sort of based on one of the Final Fantasy movies, and I wanted to take a crack at how do we create some of these shapes. And so he asked for help with some of these shapes, and I went to work on doing this, and I also got some of these techniques, some of the ideas from Algorithmic's videos themselves on how to do the flood fill node, which we'll use to do the stained glass you see here. And there was a great article that 80 Level actually shared based upon an artist from CD Projekt Red, and they talked about how to do some of these techniques with the outer circle here. But everything else, including the four-leaf clover and some other kind of shapes, I sort of came up with based upon finding reference online, and we're looking for the old mathematical ways that they used to do this for real. So let's jump in and take a look. We've got several different shapes. As you can see here, we have obviously our big rose window. We have the background is largely just kind of placeholder. What we're interested in are some of the more architectural elements. So if I zoom in a bit, you can see that the rose window itself has some really intricate shapes in it. And then we have down here, there's this scroll work here. We have this kind of tri-shape thing here, these three circle bundles that are rotated. It's very difficult to describe, but it's a cool shape. And then here's the four-leaf clover looking thing and these arched windows. So that's mainly what we're going to be going over today. So as you can see with my graph, it's crazy as usual. Everything up here is related to what we're doing. Everything down here is just to do the filler here for the decorative bits, okay? So don't worry about anything in this area. It's really just creating the masks and things we need to make the fancy stuff look nice. So let's begin at the beginning. Most of this is built off of using the power of the curve node, and you'll see here that we use that quite a bit. So it's a gradient linear 1 thrown into a curve node, and if I expand this, zoom in, this is what it ends up looking like, and you can see this is our very simple curve here. So to add points to the curve, you can click and add, and then you can click and drag these guys. And I believe if you control click on some of these edges, yeah, you can get the Bezier handles and move those around as well. And playing around with this will give you all kinds of really cool results in here. So don't forget about the curve node. I recently did a video and a user pointed out to me that I had forgotten about the curve node, and it's true. It's a powerful tool, and make sure you use it. All right, so pretty standard stuff right here. If you've seen some of my previous videos, we make rings pretty easily by taking one shape and then blending a subtracted version of a scaled down version of itself. So we're cutting out that middle. So we do that to create a couple of different rings that we're going to be using later. Okay, so let's dive right in on one of the most complicated pieces. So if you see here my reference imagery, I was looking up some of the old architectural ways that they used to do some of these shapes, and you can see it's all the same basic principles we do all the time, just in very clever ways. So really this is nothing more than a circle with circles inside of it, and then smaller circles, and then we're getting these curved lines. And if you take a look at this, which I scaled so we can see it a little bit more appropriately, this again is just circles with rings inside of those rings, and then there's these two triangles, and those are used for positioning the different angles that you need. Then if you see here, these three rings that all share a bottom central pivot point at the tip of one of those triangles, rotated and then cut out of the other rings, you end up with this really cool shape. So what I was going for here was mainly these almost like ghosts to me. Like a head, shoulders, and then the tail. So if you think of it that way, we're going for these ghost shapes because we can get the other shapes by the fact of their absence. So everything up here you'll see is what I did in order to sort of just copy what they were doing here. So you can see I started with a triangle. So there's our triangle in the center. Let's get that squared up. Scaled it down to fit. Put the triangle in there so that it perfectly hits those points right there. Then we're going to be putting another circle in the middle, and this circle has to meet up right along these edges, okay? Then another triangle in the center there, and if we look back, you can see that this is what we're copying. We're doing this. We're just kind of taking what they did to give us the same kind of guidance that we need to make these shapes. Okay, so back to our shapes. Now we're going to put these lines through it here, and this is based upon a very thin shape of a square. Yeah, 0.005 on the X. And then you just throw that into, this is a splatter circular, yeah, to get the crisscrossing effect here, just to make sure we have the right lines. Then you'll see that we're going to blend in a piece that we're going to create down here. But if we just keep going with our reference here, you'll see we get those 3 circles, and we're using the lines here to make sure they line up here and here and here. And by blending everything in together with the lines, we can see we have our final shape here, and this is our nice little reference. So then if we just start to build that, so we're taking our ring, okay, and then we have to build these little tricircular things. And so it's simply scaling down, moving, transforming, and I'm actually rotating this by 120 degrees each time, and then blending them together. And that creates a perfect set of 3 circles that follow that triangular pattern. By putting that together with the ring, you can see we start to get some of this shape. Then I'm going to fill in the middle of the hole with another circle. Then this guy is actually subtracting from down here, so let's take a look. So from here, I'm going to do a splatter circular, and this is a pattern of 3. Let's see, 3.18 on the radius, 0.2 on the X for global offset, 0.09 on the Y, and then scale of 0.96, and I think that's everything. Yes. So that gives us this. Then, as you can see here, by rotating it and then rotating it around and putting these guys together, you get this little trifecta of them. And by bringing that up as a subtractive mask into our current mask here, look at what we get. We now have our ghost shapes with the little things. And yes, it's not exactly the same, but you know, we're getting very close. So then here's the real magic of what we do for a lot of these, is we throw it into a bevel. This bevel is very small. It's a 0.02 with a smoothing of 0.75, but we are using a custom curve. And that curve, if you select this line and follow it, where does that go? All the way back up to here, our curve node. All right, and you can see here what that's giving us. Let me come back down here. You can see here what that's giving us here is we have this nice kind of flat and then a gradated fall off to our background shape. And that gives us these shapes here. Let's see if we can move all the way in here and take a look. There we go. That gives us these shapes here. So they look really good. And this is a neat shape because it looks really hard when it's all done, but it's actually not that difficult to create. So down here is some masks, and I have a couple of alternates. You can see here this is labeled base shape. Then over here is my first alternate. And what I did here was I took a selection, a color to mask using this topmost color, okay? And that gave me this mask. And then if I throw that into a further bevel, even further pulling back on that shape, exact same settings, I just made it negative 0.03. Then if I blend that as a subtract against the original, you'll see what I'm getting here. I'm getting just these wireframe edges, and it cuts out the original ghost shapes, and it's cutting out the other, leftover scrap areas. So then I throw that into a levels to blow out the whites. So I pull the white all the way down here, and then do a color to mask to get that white as an individual mask. So now if you put this with this, you have that instead of these. So that's your first alternate. Our second alternate here, if you look carefully, essentially we're doing the same thing, but instead of subtracting out, we're actually going to apply it on top. So this is just a secondary layer. You can see our first layer goes from here to here, and then this would be the area all in here, but you can see we come in a little bit further and do it again. And then we have a levels here because we need to actually lower the lightness of the background in order to put the other one on top of it, because otherwise you're going to have something sinking in when you want it to be pushing out. So that's just an alternative, second alternate of that shape. Very cool. Okay, so this curved triangle, we saw that in our reference up here. If you look at this here, you see this curved triangle here, right? It's essentially a triangle, but each leg of it is kind of bowed outward. I wanted to make that shape, and this is one that I did get from the 80 level tutorial, but I want to show it to you more clearly here in case you had trouble reading their diagram. So this is a Polygon 2, sides of 3, rotation of 90 degrees, and a curve of 0.5. Then I put it into a blur high quality grayscale, and this is going to be a 1.25 on the intensity. Then a histogram scan, position of 0.77, contrast of 1. And then an edge detect, width of 6, roundness of 4. Invert true. And that gives you this shape, which I don't happen to use in the design except for the decorative bits later on, and I'll show you briefly how that works. Okay, so let's talk about the rose window outer ring. And this is the thing that came from their tutorial as well, but I wanted to use it in mine, and I'll just kind of go over how it works. So this is to create this outer ring here with a little bit of this stepping nature here, and then the separations between the what would be the stones. So again, we're going to use a gradient linear 1, this time with a different curve setup, and I just kind of played around with this until I liked the way this looks. I wasn't really paying attention to the particular pattern this makes. I was just looking at when I'm all done, and I put it in here, how this looks. Okay, so throwing a bevel from a shape node for our circle. This is a disk with a scale of 0.82 thrown into here, and our bevel here is a 0.13 round, no smoothing, and we are using our curve node. Okay, that gives us this. Then what I'm going to do is, let's pause that and come down here to explain kind of how this works its way in there. But first we're going to throw this into a levels and crunch it down, and then do a color to mask to get a mask of this ring, because we're going to need that here and onward. So if we use the starburst node, which is another node that I don't think a lot of people know about or use, and you should, there are 24 branches, 0, the size minimum is 0.005, the size maximum is 1.09. And that's important to know that the 1.09 does make it go beyond here and it starts to loop back, but we're going to crop it out, so that's okay. In the original tutorial, they did invert it, but I choose not to. I do it levels here and I crunch down the values to try to make them very, very white. We're going to do a slope blur grayscale, and this just kind of breaks up the shape here. You can see how jagged and broken it looks, and we're doing that from a black and white spots 3. No specialness to the black and white spots. I just pulled it in. In here we have, for the slope blur grayscale, we have 31 samples, could probably go 32. Intensity of 0.05, and it is set to minimum as the mode. So then, I don't actually end up using this because I didn't like how broken up it was, but you can use it if you want. From this levels, we're going to use that as a subtractive nature on top of our rings. And you can see how it cuts it off. And if you can see carefully, I don't know if it shows up in the video or not, but it continues and the background is not quite black, so we need to fix that. So that's why we use this color to mask to kind of crop it out and crop it off right there. So now we have our individual stones separated at even intervals. And that's essentially what goes in here. All right, excellent. Okay, so our intricate scroll work here is actually going to come from later on from our knot. So we're going to come back to it once we've created this shape so that it makes more sense, okay? So we'll come back to that in a second. Let's talk about creating the knot. So this is our final product for the knot, which is this cool, almost sort of Celtic, but I thought it was really cool. We used it for the decoration here along the horizontal bar here. It looks really nice. So what we're going to do to create this is pretty simple. This is a transform, and what are we transforming from? Let's take a look. We're actually coming way down here from this, and this guy is a transform from all the way up here. So, a little confusing, but let me show you. So this is just a circle, and if we come all the way down, I'm moving this up a little bit, and then what I'm doing here is doing some warping. All right, so we're going to directional warp, but first we're going to get a polygon 2, 4 with 45 on the angle, so we get this diamond shape. I'm going to invert it, invert grayscale, and then I'm going to warp. And we're warping with an intensity of 50 and an angle of 90. We're going to warp our circle is going to be our input to that. So you see what happens here. It gets almost like a leaf shape. This would be perfect for making leaves. I'm going to transform 2D to flip it around. Then I'm going to transform 2D and kind of crunch it down a bit. Then I'm going to blend the two together. So by blending the top of this and then blending this circle along the bottom, I get a circle bottom that has this kind of tip pulled off the end of it. Very cool. So that is going to come up here. All right, we're going to position that. Essentially, we're positioning this so that the two will butt up against each other. See, this is a blend of this guy and this guy sent through this transform to flip them around. Blend those two together so that they marry up together right there. Then we're going to use a shape stroke grayscale. Hard to say, but cool to use. So the width here is going to be 0.25, and I just left it at default white and black. Color to mask, choosing the white parts because we want that. And here's where we're going to get a little creative with our shape. I'm going to throw this into a blend and use my favorite cropping method here. So using the cropping area, a bottom of 0.5, we'll cut off everything underneath of it. Transform 2D to move it just a little bit up, 0.005 on the Y. I'm sorry, 0.05 on the Y. Down here, I'm going to transform it. I'm going to move it up and scale it out quite a bit. Transform and move it down again so that when I blend the two together, they marry up again. So essentially, I'm taking this and just kind of stretching out the bottom. But this is the process to do that. Then, let's go ahead and throw that into a bevel, and we're going to borrow from our curve mask above. Bevel of 0.02, smoothing of 0.75, and round. And it creates this effect, which is really nice. Okay, transform 2D, move it, scale it just a little bit taller. And then we're going to throw this into a splatter circular. And the splatter circular is interesting because our pattern amount is only 1, but our ring amount is 4. Okay? And we're bringing in our input. Radius of 0.23. Let's see, ring radius multiplier of 1. Spread is normal. No offsets. Size of 0.5. Scale is normal. Everything else is pretty normal. Center orientation is true. And that's it. But by doing 4 sub-rings, if you will, it takes our shape and keeps duplicating it, moving it out, duplicating, moving out. And the way that they overlap is phenomenal. Then here at the very bottom, this is important, our blending mode is set to max. And that means that they sort of combine and just keep going. So we get this really cool shape. And just to make sure that it's absolutely uniform, if you look in the center here, it's not quite symmetrical. So just to make absolutely sure, I just take 1/2 and say crop on the right, mirror that, and then blend them together. And I get this shape that is not quite the same. You'll notice there's no four holes in the center, there's only 1. And now here I have the 4 because I made sure that it is absolutely mirrored down the center. There we go. So that is our knot. Very cool knot. Okay, so now that we've explained how we got this shape, let's go back up and take a look at our intricate scroll work. All right. So we're going to throw that into, and this here is a shape mapper. Circle with pattern of 4, radius of 0.05. We get this. Then I'm going to do a blend, and what I'm doing is taking a square that we have elsewhere, rotating it on a 45-degree angle just to get this shape here. This is my mask. I only want to keep what's in this kind of quadrant, if you will. And that's what we're left with. Then we're going to throw that into a splatter circular, and look at this cool effect. This looks so neat. So same trick here. This is a pattern amount of 1, but then my ring amount is 20. And now let's take a look down here. We've got radius of 0.25. My spiral factor is a -3. So you can put this into the negative, and it'll help you create this effect. Global offset of 0.25. Size of 0.5, nothing changed there, I don't think, from the standard. Center orientation true, and again, max. And we get this, which is really cool. Then I took it a bit further and said, okay, what happens if I blend it with a copy of itself inverted? That looks really cool. And then I said, okay, I want to keep trying things. Let's do the same thing again, but let's move them closer to each other. And this transform here is very specific, but I moved it over just so that the tips would line up perfectly in the crevices of the tips above. So you see they all kind of interlace with each other. And this would make a really sweet railing, all kinds of cool stuff. And then I transformed it and made it twice as large if I wanted to use it in different scaled settings. I ended up just kind of using it on the edges here. They do sort of blend in too much. But I like the way they look, and they look cool on like a pillared. This would look really cool on a book binding as well. All right, so now let's talk about our 4-leaf. So here's my reference. So this is an image I found. You Google Gothic architecture. This is probably one of the first images you'll see. So the challenge was to create this center part here. And as you can see, it's definitely that ball shape, that circle shape with a little tip pulled off, okay? And then here's my final result. I blended over top just to make sure that I was meeting it pretty close. It's not exact because, again, we're dealing with different numbers and such, but it's pretty close. So again, we're taking the ball. We already did some of this. And again, you know, we have our shape here, a polygon, and we're going to invert it, do the warp, combine the two, and now we have the ball shape with the little tip. So again, I'm going to transform, flip it, blend them together, transform, rotate that, blend those together, take a ball from above, put them together, so we have the center part here, shape shape stroke grayscale, pardon me, 0.25 color to mask. And now you can see we pretty much have our shape here. And then we're going to take a bevel on that and make sure we use that. And we use that in a couple places. You can see one of them is right here. And then again in these windows and the sub windows and everything. And I think they get used up here as well. Yeah, right here. So for all of those, they get used. Very cool. This is a neat shape. I like that challenge of how do you create these cool shapes. Okay. So then I started playing around with all kinds of things. We did our tri-spin. The rose window here we created by just doing a whole bunch of things. So for example, if I come down here, I took this guy and said, okay, I must be able to do something cool with this guy if I throw him into a shape or a circular. So I throw him up here into a splatter circular. And this is 24. Let's see, 0, 1, 1. Everything is fine there. Radius of 0.25. Spread is fine. Size of 0.25 and then 0.53 because I wanted to make sure it was taller than it is wide. Scale of 0.75 just to make sure it wasn't going off the edge. And same for the rest of this. I think nothing else has changed. So that creates this, which is really cool. So then I said, hey, let's try to, we'll cut out the center there and we'll start building up our rose window here. So a lot of these shapes are from creating just weird combinations here. So for example, this is another splatter circular, and I think this one is actually pulling from our four-leaf clover. So if we bring this guy up here and take a look at him, he's 10 on the pattern, radius of 0.3, and then we have 0.5, 0.5, everything else is normal. I'm not sure if I hit the invert. No, I don't think I did. Nope. Okay, so yeah, see what that creates. And it's pretty neat because it was a four-leaf clover, but then because of the nature of the pattern and the repetition, and they sort of flow into one another, so you get some shapes that you didn't start with, which is cool. So we're taking one shape and using it X number of times to create even different shapes. So here's some more of our rings, bringing different rings down, different heights. And then here, we put a ring and put the clover in the middle. So that's pretty cool. That's what we use directly in some of these areas like this. We'll use it in this area. Then here's another one where let's take from here, I'm going to take the clover, but just take one part of it by again doing this trick. See, bring this up and then use that as a mask to cut that guy out. Throw that into a splatter circular because now it's only part of the clover. And that left this weird little part here where these almost look broken. But then I said, oh, that's okay. Let's throw a ring over top of it. You'll never know the difference. And then I put another ring on the outside of that. And that made really cool. This just looks like a really nice window. And that is actually the center of our rose window. Okay, so then each of these is just layering in different effect. This one here was just an example to show you off all the different ones that we've made. So here's all the different variations we have here. We have lots of variations, and we've got this one with the rose with the four leaf. This is made from part of a four leaf, and then here's our two variants here. You can see them side by side. That's a nice view there to see them side by side. So this is just kind of building that all up. So, don't worry about that piece right there. Okay. So that was pretty much all of that. Then what we're going to look at one last little bit here is the rose window and the stained glass. So for the rose window, again, like I said, we were just throwing together different pieces here, cutting things out. And then I took this guy, made it a bit smaller, combined those together. And then I took this guy. So again, this is another of the four-leaf clover, but 24, radius of 0.28. Size is 0.075 and 0.2, in case you want to follow along exactly. And it does have a ring rotation of 22 degrees. So then when we start combining some of these things, see, that's those guys put right in there in that crevice there. So from that to that, and then this is actually a little out of order here, but this is a shape mapper, circle 10 pattern, 0.72 on the radius and 0.3 on the width, taken from our intricate scroll work, as you can see there. So we can throw those two together and we get that. Then this is, again, like I said, we finished that guy, so let's just put him into 24.37 radius. And then this should have the same 0.75 scale. Should have the same, yes. Ring rotation, 22 degrees. To make sure that they line up properly, you can see that fits him right here in between these guys. We're starting to put together our rose window quite nicely. Another shape mapper, and this time I took the same pattern, but I said 24 again, of course, 0.19 on the radius, 0.075, 0.2. I'm not using any rotation at all for this one. And because of that, when I put it together, he's going to be in the middle again. But this time, because he's smaller, they sort of overlap a bit, and it really starts to look like almost like the tops of like a wrought iron fence. You get these really neat effects in the middle here, and they start to really combine nicely. So that's kind of our finalized rose window pattern there. As you can see, it's just a lot of things layered together. And then all of this in here is dealing with the different parts of the height map build. So we're putting, our outer pieces over top of everything properly. So over here are masks. So this is a mask for everything that is part of the window. And then this should be the inverse of that, which is everything that will be glass in the window. And this is that less the outside. And then this is the invert of that. So using this guy, we're going to come down here. We're going to create some stained glass. So we're going to take a cells 3, scale of 41, invert true, do an edge detect on that. And it's not perfect. You have some spots missing. But edge of 0.125 and a edge roundness also of 0.125. And I'm going to throw them into a flood fill. And if I turn this on, there you go. You can see the result there. Then I'm going to throw that into a flood fill to random color. And that kind of gives us a really good base for stained glass window, obviously. So then throwing that over here and then using the proper mask, you can see that we get the colors of our window. Looks really cool. Down here, I wanted to create something a little crazy for the normal map, just to make sure that it catches the light and gives it some visual interest. So again, I'm taking our flood fill and putting it into a flood fill to random gradient. And the same thing down here. So 2 copies, but this is directly from one of the algorithmic tutorials. But if you take this, you notice the random seed is 0. And this one is a copy, but the random seed is 1. Then I'm going to blend the two together with min darken, and you'll see what we get here. Some of the shapes have this line through them where they're kind of separated, almost like it's a fold in a piece of paper. So then by masking that out and then turning that into a normal map, you'll see what we get here. Some really nice crisp detail, and even some of the stepping errors are actually playing to our favor to make sure that these things have some edges that will catch the light, so it will kind of shimmer a little bit. And over here is again combining all of our different masks so that we end up with our final masks here. So this is our color mask, our normal. You can see I put the stones in the background just to make it look like a cathedral, so just some set dressing to it. And down here we created some of these things, which are just taking that curve. I'll show you how we make this archway, but using the archway, putting these guys in, and then smaller archways. It's just sort of combinations. And then here's some more of our colors. Obviously there's nothing metallic about this. Here's our final height map, which is more for decoration than it is an actually appropriate height map. Some of these are way too despondent. Okay. So we come down here, this whole area is just generating our decorations. So I'm going to go through it very quickly because it's not very important to today's content, which was up here. But essentially what I'm doing here is creating masks to create these different areas. And this is the most important part. So using this shape that we made earlier, and by blending in with a square, but our square is very specifically scaled so that it lines up exactly with this edge, okay? Then by using that and subtracting with another one that is scaled inwards, I can get this shape, okay? So we're taking this and combining a square, then taking that square again and shrinking it a little bit so that it fits just inside these edges. And by using that to subtract from this, we get this. So once you have this, the rest is super easy, because now I can throw this into a bevel and I can create some really cool edges to it. And then this is just used over and over again down here. As you can see, I'll bring down one of these guys, put this guy in its place, and then I'll just make that smaller and combine the two. And then put another one in there, combine the two. Come on, combine the two. There you go. And then I'm going to put another one, move it over, combine. So you can see this kind of inset look to it. And we get all the way to the end here, and I'm going to combine it with a mirrored copy of itself, which helps to make sure we have symmetry down the middle. But now we have these shapes. So again, once you have the one shape, the rest is very easy. And the rest of this just follows in the same pattern. We're just kind of combining things and creating different shapes. And, you know, this is a doorway, so I have a little bit of wood there, which I borrowed from other substances just to put wood for the doorway, stone for the background, all just decorative type stuff. And again, I did some stained glass here as well. So same thing. I literally borrowed from above and then just said, let's just scale it down a bit more. And then with the proper mask, we can put that in place. So that's all there is to it. Just once you have the base shapes, then really you're just kind of using them in different and in interesting ways. So I hope that this was really helpful for you guys. I hope this really helps my friend who asked for it. And I'm going to, of course, put the SBS file up. You guys can take a look. Do note, please, that I am using 2017.2.2. So you will need this version or higher in order for this to work. But the principles are the same, and you should be able to, within reason, create this in almost any version of the software. So I really hope that you guys have enjoyed, very much so. I enjoyed making it. I love the puzzle solving of cutting these shapes down and figuring out how to make them. And I'm up for more crazy shapes. If you guys have a suggestion, please let me know. I'll be interested to tackle that challenge. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed very much. And until next time, guys, keep practicing, get better, and I'll see you next time as the pilgrimage continues.